When Saudi Arabia was announced as the host of the 2034 FIFA Men's World Cup this past week, there were the usual headlines about human rights abuses in that country. While I'm all for highlighting and correcting human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia or Australia or anywhere for that matter, I really don't like it when it's applied hypocritically and as a total lens without pulling back a little to see what else is going on in the country. Now, I've probably had the benefit of living in the Middle East for a couple of years and I enjoyed that experience because I learnt so much. So I just thought, so that we don't have another decade of negative headlines like we saw leading into the Qatar World Cup in 2022, which ended up being a phenomenal FIFA World Cup event, just to highlight that. But I thought I'd probably try and talk to a few people who might try and give a bit of a different understanding, shine a bit of a different light on their own experiences and how they view these sorts of discussions, which are really fraught. There's a lot of people who are very emotionally and highly engaged in this, and I appreciate that completely. But there's always more to a particular story. And so, first off, this week for the Sports Ambassador, I thought I'd speak with Donna Massey. Now, she's the recently retired Queensland Trade and Investment Commissioner who's been based in the Middle East, first having gone there in 1991. She did a lot of work in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, where she still is today. And before that, she was also the head of the Chamber of Commerce, the Australia Arab Chamber of Commerce, based in the Middle East. Here's Donna. See what you think after you've heard from her.
I first came to the Middle East in 1991. A colleague of mine was building a hotel, and I thought I'd been living in London for a couple of years, and I'd never been to the Middle East, so I jumped on a plane, and it just captured me. But from the first instance, just the vision of the leaders and what they were growing and developing, and just to see the remarkable, as I say, just visionary. And I just wanted to be a part of that. So I packed my suitcases, 21, 22 years old, and moved to the UAE. I probably went into Saudi for the first time about 20 years ago. It's a lot different to how it is now. Saudi, as you're aware, Tracy, has really opened up in the last 3 years, and it's much easier, of course, getting a visa and transiting through. And also women, you don't have to cover anymore in the kingdom. There's the rate of reform, particularly in gender equality, has been extraordinary, particularly over the last few years. I think in the last 3 years, female employment was sitting at about 17%. It's now up to a whopping nearly 40% of females that are employed in the workforce. So just seeing that rate of reform, I think, has been extraordinary. Not only the growth of the Emirates, but now the growth of Saudi with what they're doing with the Giga projects. We've got some wonderful Australians there heading up. We've got Wyatt Roy at Neom. We've got the fabulous David Henry working for MISC. And it's always terrific to have such strong Australian allies working in these big projects, because it just helps assist Australian companies come and get established in the market. So yeah, there's a lot of developments going on, a lot of, and now, of course, with Saudi winning the World Cup, that's going to be another huge change, I think, for the kingdom. I see a lot of fast tracking of a lot of the political and social reform that we've seen happen there. And I think that we will see quite a large influx of, the tourism in Saudi, which they've got such a beautiful and rich culture. And I think it's a great opportunity for them to showcase that. But I also think that part of what we will see is a large uptake of females in sport, which I think is a wonderful part of that reform that we're witnessing as well.
Well, I know in a lot of the sort of sports areas, there's a lot of women that are working inside those organisations, either heading up some organisations as vice presidents of other organisations, so quite senior roles. I know that
Yes.
women are now playing football at school and there's a real program there. I guess what a lot of people don't know, who may not have ever experienced the Middle East, and all they get fed is what we read in the media, which seems to be incredibly kind of one-tracked.
Yeah.
But it's an incredibly young population, isn't it? And I think particularly for Saudi Arabia, where you've got something like 63% of the population is under 30, which is phenomenal. And part of their vision 2030 was about addressing some of the huge health issues that they saw coming in the future because of obesity and, all sorts of problems associated with diet. So getting the people active was a big part of the reason to get them interested in sport. And here we are. They've now got so many sports on their landscape. So I guess what hit you when you first went there, and when you look back to that now and you pivot forward, do you say, oh my gosh, actually what has happened is hugely significant? Because I don't know if we've ever had such a cultural, economic shift so quickly as they have.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, a perfect example of that, Tracy, was a number of years ago. A woman was under the cloak of darkness and hiding from the religious police. It was teaching people, women, how to play football. 3 years ago, she's now assistant minister for sport. So that change is just, it's just not talk. It's not just talk. The reform is real. And towards the Vision 2030, as you've rightly said, the push is there and the intent is real. So it's not just language, the changes are happening and they're happening very quickly. As you say, it's always been, with any sort of progress come the fast food outlets and, all the naughties. And, weight has been an issue. And there's a very high prevalence of diabetes here in the Middle East. And that is also being tackled, by the various ministries of health, etc. So, yeah, just to witness that, I think has been probably one of the most outstanding things to see, and just to see the growth of these two nations over the past 20, 30 years. It's been a privilege to watch.
I can imagine. And also, being one of the first women to run a business inside the UAE, I lived in the UAE much after you first went there. And, one of the things that struck me, but I even saw that change just in the couple of years that we were there, is that my husband was always away because he was reporting for CNN at the time. So it was me and the kids effectively. And it was nearly impossible for me to go to the bank to withdraw certain amounts of money for me to be able to pay uni fees because I needed my husband to sign, and he wasn't going to be there for another couple of months. So I was often having these arguments, but that shifted, like it shifted very quickly. What do you think when you hear some of the things that are reported in Australia, and some of the things that people might say in Australia about Saudi Arabia or the UAE or that part of the world that you think are just completely wrong? The framing is wrong.
Yeah, look, that's a great question, Tracy. And I think if I had a dollar for every time I was asked what's it like doing business as a woman in the Middle East, because it is, you are so well respected as females here. And I think there is that global misunderstanding of what it's like to live in the Middle East and what it's like culturally. I mean, at the moment, you can't walk into a building without being knocked over by Christmas trees and reindeers and, Santas. It's just, our culture has that misunderstanding. I think we need to become ambassadors as we live here in the Westerners that do live in the region. We do have to go and educate people about what it's really like to live here, and the vision of the leadership here and the support of females, not only in industry, but in education and all through the different sector, private sector and public sector. There is a huge support. And yeah, I do get very frustrated at some of the misconceptions of the region. And I think I just say to people, we'll get on a plane and come and see it for yourself, because you'll really be surprised. I know that when people do come here, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. This is amazing. And we have a saying that once you've had sand between your toes, you'll always come back to the Middle East.